The first Purge, the prequel to The Purge, was released in 2018, 4 years after the uprisings in Ferguson in 2014 and 2 years prior to the uprisings of 2020. The timing is of significance considering the film's content and social commentary. The goal of this video is to parallel how the plot depicted in the installment of the Purge franchise is an eerie echo to our reality. The only difference? The NFFA at least had the decency to sound a siren to notify the residents of Staten Island that state-sanctioned violence was about to ensue. In reality, this nation engages, incites, and perpetrates violence against marginalized folk, black, brown, queer, trans, etc., in their communities all the time with no warning. If you ask me, we're in the midst of a purge, and it is just as, if not more horrifying than the film. What is good to be a crucial girl, back with another video, and this time I want to do a little bit of a video essay. It's been a while since I broke down some media. The Purge franchise is a series that I've always loved and drawn near to. I feel like this was where I really started to fall in love with like the horror dystopian genre, and I feel like something that the Purge franchise has done exceptionally well consistently in all the films is providing really good social commentary. And the first Purge is without a doubt my favorite in the whole franchise. So the goal of this video is to do a few things. One, to get you to see obviously the parallels. I also hope this video allows you to expand your definition of violence, what it looks like, how it manifests itself, and also I want you to ask the question, or who gets the privilege to romanticize violence and who has the privilege of dispensing it, right? And also to help you critically engage with the world around you, whether it be film, whether it be media, whether it be a book. That is what these videos are for. And I feel like the easiest way to do this was to break this video down into 3 parts. So first, we are going to talk about the Purge significance, like the symbolism, the social commentary, and all the things like that. And then I will be doing a character breakdown analysis where we will get into a little bit of critiquing about how some of the characters are written. And then lastly, we will go scene by scene, kind of highlighting certain things so I can exactly parallel them with other things that are going on in the world right now. So why the first Purge? The reason why I feel like the first Purge is so significant is because what it represents. If there ever was to be an experiment to see if something like an annual purge could work, it would take place in predominantly black and brown communities. Your barrios, your hoods, your ghettos, the places that are already disregarded by the state anyway. Places where people have trouble getting access to their basic need, whether it be food stamps, them only having access to certain things. Those people are often criminalized for not being able to participate in society the way other middle class or upper class folk are able to do. Just how the origin story of something like this becoming a thing and eventually spawning into other films is that it started in a community, in a place where these folks are not exactly on anybody's radar. These are folks that would have an incentive to participate in something like the Purge, whether it would be simply to survive and whether it would be to actually engage in the Purge, to actually go out and commit crime. And it also is a no-brainer because in impoverished communities, if there is poverty, poverty will breed crime. People that just need their basic needs, whether it be food, whether it be clothes, they will commit crimes to be able to feed their families, you know? And just to give you guys a more concise idea of what the NFFA represents in the film, I'm going to give you a quote of my good friend Paul Patterson. This quote, along with another one I'll be using from Paul, will be included in a book that's going to be released later this year.
The New Founding Fathers of America, NFFA, actively strips people of their individuality by encouraging them to reject individual social norms such as respect for life or friendship. If we keep in mind that the monstrous in the film is a repressive, totalitarian regime, then the violence of purging is subsumed by the larger danger of the NFFA and its ideology. The political principles of the NFFA are the true monster that lurk in the background and infect everything it encounters, a point the filmmakers made emphatically in the first Purge, 2018. Purging is the violent, physical manifestation of these subjective ideations at work in society.
Before filming this video essay, I did do a rewatch of the first Purge, and the first Purge is a film I've seen quite a few times because I do love Ela Noel and I wish she was in more things. There were certain scenes that were a lot more harrowing to witness this time around because this time when I was watching it, it was with the knowledge that this is a very vivid depiction of what is happening in other places across the world, and we will get to that as we go scene by scene. But when it comes to the NFFA, it makes me obviously think of how it symbolizes our government. And I know when we think of something like the NFFA, we're probably thinking like, oh, that's too far-fetched, our government would never do something like that. And it's like,
are you sure?
if we were to ever go through a rebranding of our government, or just in general have a new type of president, that totalitarian regime that Paul is referencing in the film is not a far off cry from what I believe we would see in our reality. So I went to the character breakdown analysis. I was literally writing my notes as the characters were appearing in the film, and then I went back and refined some things. So I kind of tried to give every character like a title, like just so we can kind of have an idea of what they represent. And I feel like all these characters are symbolic of different places in society, especially when it comes to black and brown folk. Isaiah, black boy on the cusp. So many young black men also feel this same pressure, or just in general want to do better, want better for their families and for the people around them. We never get a chance to meet Isaiah and Naya's parents in the film, but it's left to be assumed that Naya is the one that is the legal guardian of her younger brother. But he ditches school to help provide for his family. He sees the condition that him and his sister Naya live in and wants to change their circumstances, and obviously the way to do that is with money. But the alternative to making money the legal way does not seem as quick as profitable as the illegal one. What would make a character like that, or make a young man like that, want to participate in something like the Purge? What drives them to do that?
I'm angry. Very angry.
You want to release that anger?
I need to.
As I said, greater participation yields greater financial compensation.
And like I say, it is the environment. He sees that, you know, the apartment him and I live in, it's not safe public housing. There's always problems, there's always issues, and the state doesn't seriously consider the needs of people in these communities, and so it kind of leaves them to fend for themselves. But in general, you cannot terrorize folks via lack of accessibility to their basic needs and expect them to not respond to the type of violence being enacted upon them. The oppressor creates a breeding ground for certain types of violence to take place. Example, gentrification, mass incarceration, voter suppression, they are all forms of state-sanctioned violence. And I feel like a lot of young black men feel the same way. When they see their mothers, their sisters, or whoever in a tough spot, they feel as though it is their responsibility to provide in some way or to help out in some way. And that could also lead into a conversation about the adultification of young black boys always having to grow up way before they're supposed to. And even though Isaiah, I think, is probably around 17 or 18 in the film, he doesn't have a chance to really be a kid. He's already seeing the reality of what it's like to not feel safe in where he lives and not feel safe in his environment, to see his sister struggling. Dimitri, kingpin turned community hero. Now, even though we do not have a lot of background on Dimitri in the film, we are kind of just given the information that he is the local kingpin. Okay, he's the head nigga in charge, basically, okay? And he be pushing P, essentially. And even though we're not giving a lot of background on how he grew up, it is safe to say that he grew up in the same type of environment that Isaiah is currently growing up in, and he was faced with a lot of the decisions and alternatives that Isaiah is faced with now, and kind of just being at war with what is the best way to go about providing for myself and making sure I am safe. And Dimitri took the route where he saw a way to make money that inevitably makes him a statistic and makes him a stereotype, and he does in a way perpetrate that same violence against his own community by pushing out product that does harm them, that causes addictions, and so on and so forth. Dimitri, for all intents and purposes, is a capitalist. He is focused only on protecting what he needs to ensure his safety and that of his crew and of his product. Now, Dimitri, probably like anyone else growing up in a similar type of environment, is going to be leery of when the state likes to come in and wants to do this experiment. You see throughout the film, Dimitri comes to realize that all that leeriness, that uneasiness he felt throughout about the whole process of the Purge was warranted. And despite his inevitable contribution to his community's issues, with him being a narcotics salesman, he knows that if he doesn't protect his community, if he doesn't protect his people, no one else will.
NFFA been putting all this shit in the streets, y'all, hoping that we'd off each other. We didn't, and now they stoking the fire in another. Our neighborhood is under siege, gentlemen, from a government who doesn't give a about any of us. Now, there's a lot of good people out there who we're gonna have to protect now. See, the NFFA forgot about one thing. They forgot about us. This is our home.
Throughout the film, we see Dimitri, a black man, exercising the right to protect his home. violence is an expected and justified response to oppressive forces. Now, this is a little bit of a scene-by-scene highlight, but I just want to note really quickly when it comes to Dimitri, a scene that really stuck with me is how he doesn't have time to grieve the loss of his friends that are killed right before his very eyes. Like, a brief pause quite literally could have cost him his life and make the sacrifices that his friend made, you know, almost seem futile. I want to discuss briefly the rage we see exemplified in black men like Dimitri and like Isaiah, and we will get to Skeletor in a second. I feel like this is a rage that a lot of us have felt and are currently feeling, as for the last few months, since 2020 to 2014, hell, since they bought us here on that damn boat. Just the rage that you are somebody, you are in a body that is being disregarded. You know, if you're trans, if you're queer, if you're disabled, there's a certain rage that you have, especially when you see that same state, that same oppressor enact violence on other folk like you are or on your community. I feel like that rage mixed with grief is a very dangerous combo, and I feel like we've seen in the last few months even how that rage and that grief can manifest itself. When I think about rage, I think about Jonathan Jackson, the younger brother of George Jackson, one of the Soledad brothers. And I think about his thought process of what he must have went through to get to a point where he realized he was going to storm Marion County and make an attempt to free his brother.
There was no conspiracy that Jonathan, a 17-year-old man-child, was working according to the dictates of his own mind. I think most people saw that thing building in it. The loss of confidence, loss of faith in the processes that were going on.
Just to give you guys a brief overview if you don't know a lot about the Soledad brothers, Jonathan Jackson, being the younger brother of George Jackson, he got very tired of the processes of, you know, maybe always feeling like, you know, your brother's going to be free, he's going to come home. Waiting for liberation, waiting for justice to come is not always a pleasant thing. And I know people may read about Jonathan Jackson, they may read about the storming of Marion County and think, you know, he was so young and he was going through a lot, he missed his brother, and maybe he would have done things differently if he didn't get his hands on the guns. And it's like, I firmly believe that Jonathan Jackson was fully convicted about what he was doing, and I don't think he would have changed anything about that day. I feel like he went in with the intent truly to get his brother free, because he realized the same force, the same oppressive force that took his brother from him and put him in prison was not going to be the same entity that freed him, right? And sometimes going about things by waiting for the justice and waiting for the courts and the system to make a decision about a loved one's fate or about your fate, it's a painstaking one. Jonathan Jackson knew at 17 years old his brother was not going to get that. When I also think about combinations of grief and rage, I obviously have to talk about Aaron Bushnell. And watching the media turn Aaron Bushnell's revolutionary suicide into a thing of him being mentally unstable, him being mentally unwell, when on his video right before he self-immolated, he is very clear in his words and he's very specific about why he is doing what he is doing. And I feel like one of the reasons why self-immolation either is hard for people to grasp is because we can't understand what would drive a person to commit such an act. But if you are someone that is critically engaged with the world around you, you're seeing what's happening in Palestine and Congo and Sudan. And speaking of Congo, there was a man in Congo that literally set himself on fire just so what was happening could get media attention. It just goes to show how dire that need is to make sure people are paying attention, that people are listening, that you're no longer being disregarded. And so I think the grief and the rage that people are feeling, that these characters are feeling as they're watching people, their family, their community being killed, the rage at, you know, your loved ones being unjustly incarcerated, the rage at knowing that you are complicit in genocide by your tax dollars or because you are working for the entity that is allowing that violence to happen, is something that can be really hard to articulate. And if you do try to express that, it can be very dangerous. And Aaron Bushnell is not the first person to self-immolate in protest of the Gaza genocide. There was a man that did it a few months prior in Atlanta. So I feel like the grief and rage that a lot of us are feeling right now at bearing witness to these atrocities is weighing on us. I feel like it's something that the state, this nation, is not taking seriously as they see us in the street, as they see us protesting, as they see us calling them, as they see us showing up at city council, taking that as seriously as they should. Something that I really love about Dimitri's character and what the first Purge does in this film is that the viewer has a visual representation of characters resisting violence, and that also compels the viewer to expand their ideas of what type of violence is justified and who has the privilege of dishing it out. As Malcolm X reminded us in Message to the Grassroots, there are no non-violent revolutions. The fundamental question is, who is worthy of dispensing and receiving violence? Marc Lamont Hill. Naya, peaceful resistance, force of defense. Very early on in the film, there is no room for doubt as to where Naya stands when it comes to the Purge. You know very quickly how she feels about it. She sees the Purge as state-sanctioned, incentivized violence. She also sees the Purge as a way to prey on the impoverished. I gave Naya the title of peaceful resistance, force of defense because as you see the protesters in the video, they are making their voices heard. They're not being violent. They're not being aggressive. They're just letting the NFFA know that we are here. We don't agree with this. This is a community that we are against what is happening here. Something in general, though, that I kind of found not annoying per se, but it's almost like she has a little bit of a complex.
Now, ladies, it's not me telling you to go out and date a hood nigga.
But she fails to understand that Dimitri is surviving like the rest of the community, but he does it with the burden of hurting his community also.
But every day it's at least two who are hurt because of you, D.
I know no other way.
Now, the Purge is one day. You destroy this community 364 days a year.
You can see there is a big difference in terms of class with Dimitri and Naya in terms of just like where they live. Like Dimitri's lifestyle, as dangerous as it is and as illegal as it is, has provided him a comfortable place. Like he has a nice apartment, he has access and all those things. So there is a difference in how Dimitri and Naya have gone about trying to survive. Skeletor, the state-sanctioned villain. Skeletor is who you meet in the very opening scene of the film. And first off, this is such a captivating performance. Oh my goodness, like from the minute he comes on screen, you are just automatically like engulfed in what is about to happen. You feel that anger, you feel that rage of being disregarded, of being neglected. Skeletor is a character that is clearly in need of rehabilitation for an addiction. He's also suffering with mental health issues. And instead of providing the resources or the things that a character or a man like Skeletor needs in order to live in his community and to be a contribution, a helpful contribution to it, the NFFA, a regime like the NFFA, decides to weaponize his addiction and his very articulated anger for their benefit. In the block party scene during the first Purge, where everyone kind of clears out after Skeletor makes his appearance, where he's decided to purge once again, he literally screams out, almost into a void, "Save me." And something about that scene in particular really got to me because I feel like Skeletor represents so many people in these communities that have an addiction, that are struggling, that are floundering, just trying to make it day to day, and they are asking for help. They are screaming for help. The point I'm trying to make with highlighting a character like Skeletor is that this is also a human being, a depiction of a human being that also deserves your empathy. And Skeletor is also not the villain. The villain of the first Purge is the NFFA. It is the ruling elite. It is that totalitarian regime that is enacting this violence upon this community. You have to think once again about who does your rage benefit? What does a character's rage like Skeletor, who does it benefit? Our participation in holding up the status quo, who does that benefit? Lastly and finally, we are going to go scene by scene, give you some highlights. Who has the privilege of romanticizing violence or profiting from it? This came to mind during Isaiah's evaluation with the NFFA prior to the Purge, where they're kind of getting a sense of his mental state before he purges, and obviously how he, if he survives, how he will feel after. This made me think of a quote from Hanif Abdur-Rakib's book, They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us. And essentially what that quote talks about is, to inherit a black body is to live with the knowledge that you must always be prepared for violence in some way. If you are a big black man, your body will be viewed as a weapon. If you're trans, you could be misgendered and that could lead to violence. Or if you're a woman out alone, you're extra vigilant. Failure to do so can lead to violence. Living in certain bodies or environments comes as a baggage deal with the knowledge that how you exist can make you a target, and there's no easy way to reconcile that. Let's talk about the Purge block parties. I found this so interesting, and this was something that really shocked the NFFA and Dr. Updale, the scientist who came up with the experiment for the Purge.
I did not conceive of the experiment for them. The NFFA had the courage to test it, but the conceit is not a political one, it is a psychological one. The benefit of acting violently without worry of consequence, that's a freeing violence.
The fact that there were block parties happening during an event where people are supposed to be getting out their most basest, most heinous desires without consequence. People are supposed to be out committing crime, not having fun, right? And a community like the one in Staten Island that these characters live in, it should be prime real estate, right? It should be a breeding ground for crime because they're in poverty, because they don't have access to certain things. Why would they want to have fun? What Dr. Updale could not calculate, what she could not input in her scientific research when coming up with the idea for the Purge, is the community's humanity. This community being out on the block, having parties, blasting music, smoking, eating, having a good time. She did not factor in the fact that this is a community that overall, despite their lack of access to certain things or their needs or their current status, there still is a natural desire as a human being to be carefree and to live. When this demographic was not purging the way predicted, antagonists were sent in to incentivize violence to help the data be true. If it serves the elite's interest for people in certain communities to be violent against each other, if it serves the elite's interest for us to turn against each other, for us to be at each other's necks, for us to be divided, they will incite that. They will create a breeding ground for that to happen.
Been true, or did you falsify those numbers?
They can't afford. Something needed to be done.
Not like this.
I need for this to work. I need to sell this on a countrywide scale because this is our last hope.
I want to note the NFFA's insistence to make sure that images of the first killer, of the first Purge of the night, and all the other violence that ensued, it reminded me how the same way of when black men are brutalized or killed by police, those images are placed on repeat in the media. And it also goes to show that when it comes to a totalitarian regime, when it comes to the ruling elite's interests for whatever will serve them best, instead of supporting an impoverished community, they decide to criminalize them. And if that doesn't work, they snuff them out. There's a very chilling scene in the film where one of the members in the NFFA states how the city is overpopulated. This nation has too many people and somebody has to go. We have to snuff the people out that are not contributing to society in the way that we need to, or they are not contributing to society in a way that also supports us and what we need.
This country is overpopulated, Doctor.
You're trying to depopulate the lower classes just so the NFFA doesn't have to support them.
There's no easy answer where somebody, some group, doesn't suffer.
Hearing the NFFA leader make that bold statement about how the city's overpopulated reminded me of this quote from Marc from his book, We Still Here.
Being poor, black, and sick makes you more likely to die. Your proximity to death makes you disposable. Your disposability makes you more exploitable.
The first Purge gives us a clear depiction of what a militarized police force looks like, and that's why I brought up the 2014 uprisings in Ferguson, because I know for a lot of folks like myself, that was the first time I remember seeing what a militarized police force even is, and even knowing that our local police forces even had access, or that some local police forces even had access to those types of weapons that are only given to soldiers that are going to war. I feel like for me in 2020, seeing a militarized police force was very harrowing, because we see how a lot of the protests in 2020 started off peaceful, and yet they were being met with violence by the people that are supposed to be committed to protecting them. There's a scene in particular that really stuck with me this go around as I rewatched it, and that was the storming of the Project Towers. It was heart-wrenching to watch because I thought of families in Sudan and Gaza who have been experiencing something strikingly similar, an invasion of their home.
In the final third of the film, the masks of the carnival and their connection to violence expose the uncanny way the film reshapes current violent events in America. As the NFFA releases armed militias into Staten Island to spur violence and guarantee a successful purge, a montage of disturbing images plays. The montage begins with Naya, Isaiah, Louisa, and Selena witnessing truckloads of heavily armed men in blood-spattered Ku Klux Klan robes riding through the streets. An eerie rendition of America the Beautiful plays over scenes of black bodies being burned and beaten by masked men. It culminates with the most American of symbols, a baseball field where masked police officers circle around a bloodied black man who is slowly trying to crawl away. The scene ends with an aerial shot of the police raising their batons to strike. Later, as neo-Nazi militia members work their way from floor to floor of Naya's apartment, the masks they wear are reminiscent of black-faced coon caricatures of the 1930s. Paul Patterson.
I have linked in the description box below articles you guys can read more about what is happening in Sudan in regards to the RSF and how they're raiding homes and what the IOF is doing to Palestinians in Gaza. And along with those links is a resource for how you can have more information about Cop City. Because we are talking about a militarized police force, we also have to talk about where they are being trained. Where are they going to gain this knowledge of how to brutalize communities? And with the knowledge of Cop City, and not just Stop Cop City in Atlanta, a campaign I talked about in my last video essay for the Super Bowl, there are multiple cop cities being built around the nation. I believe there are only actually 3 states that don't have any plans for a cop city to be built. And if you click the link in the description box, it will take you to a PDF where you can see all the cop cities that have been built and that are currently being built. And there are an alarming amount of them that have plans for construction right now. And like I talked about in the last video essay, the Stop Cop City campaign going on in Atlanta, it just goes to show how if there is a community raising their voice about how they do not want more police presence, because more police presence in a community just means more criminalization will happen, that means more brutality happening, that means more people in that community just feeling unsafe because of the police's presence, because they know what it represents, right? No matter what, the residents of Atlanta have continued to show up, especially Black women. And when we know that a lot of the police forces here are trained by
Izzy and them, it
helps you see how much is at stake. And when I was watching the storming of the project towers where Isaiah and Nia live in, and where them and Louisa and their neighbor are taking refuge in, and there's a really chilling line during that scene where one of the masked men, who looks like kind of like a government official, somebody a part of the NFFA clearly, gets a directive or gives out the directive to kill everyone on the floor. And the reason why I thought of families in Sudan and Palestinians in Gaza going through this is that there's no film I could think of that kind of gives that depiction so brutally of what that looks like, to hear a clear directive to kill everyone, no matter what. And you will see as Dimitri is also making his way into the building and trying to get to Naya and to get to Isaiah, he is seeing literally people in their apartments defend themselves and then being shot down. And the way this militarized unit moves through the building floor by floor, just on a rampage. And I remember pausing it because it was my first time really having like an idea or a vision of what it must be like for Palestinians and people in Sudan who are experiencing the same things by forces that are coming into their homes. I know when it comes to home, I feel like we all have the knowledge now that home is not necessarily a place where you feel safe.
Got my neighborhood.
But most of us, I would say, myself included, if you're watching this video, you are sitting, in your bedroom, you're sitting in the living room, you're watching me on your phone or your TV on your tablet, and you're safe here. You know there's a safety here. Your doors are locked, your windows are closed. Like, there's nobody coming to rush in and take you or a loved one. And I think there's something about watching that scene and seeing Isaiah and Naya and Louisa looking outside their window and knowing that there are forces coming in to take them out. I can't imagine what must have been going through their minds as they are watching that happen. The reason why I gave Naya the title of Peaceful Resistance Force of Defense is because you automatically see her defense instincts kick in. She picks up a gun, she picks up weapons, she picks up anything that can be used as a weapon to defend them and their home, to defend what her and Louisa and her neighbor and Isaiah are trying to protect. And I feel like that visual of just protecting your home, protecting what is yours by any means necessary is really important for the viewer to see at a time like this. There's a conversation that happens a few moments later, or a few minutes prior, where Louisa and I are having a conversation, and she says, "I worry about this country. I worry about our future." And Naya says to Louisa, "This night will not win." There's a moment where I think for everyone where when your human rights are being inflicted on, there's a natural thing that takes over for you to defend yourself, to defend your home. Like, lots of people may see what's going on in Gaza, may think, well, why don't they just leave? Why don't they just evacuate? And at the end of the day, the Palestinians are home. That is their home. That land is theirs. Why should you be forced to leave land that is your own? When it comes to residents in Sudan who are having the RSF invade their homes, why should those people be forced to leave their homes? That is a place where you sleep at night. It's a place where you have breakfast with your family. It's a place where you lay your head. I think one of the privileges we have being American is that we're not anticipating a soldier coming into our home. We're not anticipating, necessarily the police coming in and storming in and taking over. And I feel like when you are watching on a film a community of people prepare for that, to prep for that, and the fear that comes with that, and the knowledge that like you may not survive that, it's something that really impacts you when you see it played out on screen. The same environment that birthed a man like Dimitri, it is now being left up to him to protect those that he loves from it. Dimitri will be viewed as disposable, just like the scientist Dr. May Updale. Despite her motive being strictly for scientific research, it was used in a perverse way that would serve the elite's interests. At the very final scene, we see Naya, we see Isaiah, and we see Dimitri and Louisa and their neighbor coming out of the building after the purge is over, after those 12 horrific hours are over. Naya asks Dimitri, what do we do now? And the simple answer he gives is, now we fight. Do you see now why I refer to our current reality as an echo of the first purge? We are living it. Black, brown, queer, Palestinian, Sudanese folks are living it. There is no warning sign to commence or announce violence. It has always been and remains a present factor. A nation conceived in violence only knows how to speak a language indicative of that. So what's left? After the wreckage caused by state-sanctioned violence ravages our communities, our homes, our safe havens, we are left with a decision, whether to lay down with the oppressor or to resist them. When the ruling elite's interests are dependent on the oppression of another group of people, it is the people's right to resist by any means necessary.
The slave owner has been tried and sentenced. He is training his own executioners. Frederick Douglass, 1857.
So yes, if you ask me my personal opinion, we are living in our own version of the purge. But do not let this fact discourage you. That is not what this video essay was for. The possibility of a world better than the one we currently inhabit is possible. It is up to us to not only imagine what that will look like, but doing the work to ensure that it will. I have a link in the description box below for a PDF that is entitled A Strategic Framework for a Just Transition, just so you can get an idea of what a world better than the one we are currently living in could look like if we are all willing to put the work in to make sure that it happens. I hope you guys enjoyed this video essay. It is a little bit similar to what I did in my last one, but I want to actually take the time to break down some film that I believe this does a great job of providing social commentary to discuss in a way like this. I hope this video essay be a reminder to still call and email your reps, to be out in the streets, to protesting, to form community, to be committed to doing the work to make sure that we do not see any more genocides occur. And the reality is that there are lots of things happening in the world right now, lots of atrocities in Sudan and in the Congo and Palestine, and it's important that we do the work of the privilege that we can do right now is making the voices heard and amplifying the voices of those that need it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please sure to hit that like button and be sure to subscribe. And whatever you do, don't forget to click that bell so that you get notified every single time that I post. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time with another video.
Go ahead and tell them what you want to, but you know the truth just like I do. Not to hurt like it owns you. You wanna make me the bad guy when you see the
Let's get a video. Let's go, bro, make a video. I don't know why that's the first thing that came to my mind to do. Shout out to Gigi for giving me this shirt. Ain't that cute, y'all? Y'all like my shirt? It's cute for real. Okay, it's the face thing, babes. Is it doing what it needs to do? Like, let me know, like.